2.2 linear equations in slope-intercept form. This is one of the most important lessons probably in the whole book. So if you watch this video several times, I think that would probably be a good thing. But you really want to understand this on a deep level. Okay. Okay, so linear equations, let's start with what that is, and then we'll get to slope-intercept form later on in the video. Linear equations are functions. Functions is kind of the big category, and linear equations is one example of a function. Both of the examples I used in the last video were linear equations, and you will see why in a few moments. So let's define it. Linear equation is a two-variable equation, okay? And look at all these examples, two variables, an x and a y, x and a y, x and a y, x and y. Two-variable equation. Equation, of course, remember, has an equal sign and has something on both sides of the equal sign, okay? Where the largest exponent on x is 1. So that means that the exponent on x can be 0, 1, a half. But basically, the graphs of these equations are straight lines. But if you look at x, it doesn't have an exponent, right? But when it doesn't have an exponent, it implies that there's an exponent of a 1. So there actually is a little 1 there that you don't even see. Now, we're not looking at the y. We're assuming that the y is going to have an exponent of 1 also. Okay, but basically you just have an x and a y that stand alone without an exponent on it, or an exponent of 1. Okay, the graphs of all of these, if I go to put them on this sort of graph, they're all going to be straight lines. They will look a little bit different, each one's going to look different, probably, unless they are the same thing. Hidden by something. Well, we'll talk about that later. But most of the time, these are going to look different, although they will all be straight. Okay? So an example would be like that, or like that. So please use a ruler when you're drawing these lines, not like me. I can't use a ruler yet, and I haven't figured out my line tool. So you're going to have to bear with my sloppy lines, but I don't want to bear with yours. I want you to have precise lines in your homework. Okay, so that's the definition of a linear equation. All of these are linear equations, and I know by looking at them that they're linear equations, okay? And I hope that by the end of this chapter, you will be able to look at this and say, linear equation. That's going to be a straight line, okay? Now, you don't have to predict exactly what it looks like yet, like it crosses here or up here, or it has this slope. Not yet. You can figure that out. But by glancing at this, you should know it's a linear equation, okay? All right, now here's some other terms. This constant term I know we talked about at the beginning of the year, but a coefficient. What is a coefficient? The number before the x term. Okay, so the coefficient of x here is a 2. The coefficient of x here is a 5. The coefficient of x here, 1. It's invisible, but it's there. Coefficient is a 1. What's the coefficient here? Well, the 1 is there still, but there's also a 3 underneath it. So the coefficient on this one is 1/3. This also could be written as 1/3 x, or it could be written as x over 3. So the coefficient on that one's 1/3. Tricky. Now, the less important one at this stage of the game is the coefficient of y, but let's just practice. In this one, in this equation, what is the coefficient of y? 3. What is the coefficient of y in this equation? 1. What is the coefficient of y in this equation? Getting trickier. Well, it's negative 1 because of that minus. Very important to notice that. How about the coefficient in this one? Negative 4/7. Negative 4/7. Okay. So coefficient, the way I remember it is in the car, the co-pilot is someone who is in the front of the car but in the passenger seat. So the coefficient is the number that is right next to my variable, so it goes along for the ride. Okay, a constant, we learned this at the beginning of the year, is a number in an equation that stands alone. So a number that doesn't have a variable on it because it's constantly going to be that. So in this case, we'll highlight in yellow. The constant here is 12. What's my constant in this one? negative 7. I have two constants in this equation. I've got a 0, and I've also got positive 15. The only constant in this one, negative 13. Okay? So that's just when I start talking about constants and coefficients, I want you to know what I'm talking about. So that's just a little bit of labeling information. Okay, so moving along. So now we want to talk about slope-intercept form, which is really important. So I'm giving you a function or an equation here, y equals 2x plus 4. And we talked about in the last lesson how we can find different pairings for x and y that would make and satisfy this equation. Okay, so I've taken the liberty of choosing these values for x. You can choose any values you want for x. These happen to be the ones I like because they're easy. I have some negative, I have some positive, I don't have any fraction, and I have a 0. Okay, 0 is pretty important. When you do a table, you want to include 0, and you'll see why later. So I go ahead and I do y equals 2x plus 4. So if I put in negative 2, I have y equals 2 times negative 2 plus 4. This gives me negative 4 plus 4. This gives me 0. So I've got negative 2, 0. When I put negative 1 in, I have y equals 2 times negative 1 plus 4. Negative 2 plus 4. Y equals 2. When I put a 0 in, I'll go up here. Y equals 2 times 0 plus 4. Y equals, that gives me 0 plus 4. Y equals 4. Ooh, I put some stray marks there. 1. If I put a 1 in, I have y equals 2 times 1 plus 4. Y equals 2 plus 4, or 6. And oh my goodness, I see a pattern, 0, 2, 4, 6. I bet that's going to be 8, but let's test it to make sure. Y equals 2 times 2 plus 4. That's 4 plus 4. That's 8, just like I predicted. Okay, so I don't want to lose my equation in there, or my function. So there's my function, and now I've got my table. Okay. These are all considered ordered pairs. Okay. So I've got my ordered pairs, and just like I did in the last unit, just like I did in my last unit, now I'm going to do a graph of this. Negative 2, 0. Negative 2, 0 is going to be right here. Negative 1, 2 is going to be right here. 0, 4 is going to be right here. 1, 6 is going to be right here. 2, 8 is going to be right here. Oh my, it has given me a perfectly straight line, which, if I used a ruler, would look better. Okay, so use arrows because the arrows signify that, oh, this line goes on and on and on forever. There are infinite solutions in both directions. Okay, and what we're trying to do is in this unit is that we're trying to be able to move comfortably between the equation, the table, and the graph. But there are some very important things to notice. Okay, the point right here is what we call a y-intercept, because this is my y-axis, and this is where the line intercepts the y-axis. So y-intercept. And we want to probably write what that is, where the line intersects the y-axis. The x-intercept would be right here, where it intersects the x-axis. Not as important right now, and you'll maybe not care about that at some point. That is important, but for now it's not. So the y-intercept, I sometimes also call it y sub I, because that little I represents intercept. Or you could say y-int. Okay? And in this case, my y-intercept is at 1, 2, 3, 4. So that point is right here, 0, 4. Okay, see it? Now, the other thing to notice, by the way, that's the word intercept, 0, 4. The other thing to consider is, well, what is my slope? Remember slope from the last unit where we did rise over run. So let's pick two of my points and look at the slope. If I do a rise over run, what is the rise? I'm rising up 2 and I'm running 1. Well, check the next one. Rising up 2, running 1. Rising 2, running 1. Rising 2, running 1. So my rise over run is 2 over 1 or 2. That's my rise over run. So my slope is 2. My intercept was 0, 4. I'll just say 4. And now let's look back at my equation. Do you see anything about what I found here? The slope is 2. The intercept is 4. Do you see how these two line up? And that is actually no coincidence. Those line up because this equation is in its slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept. Okay? All right, that's a lot of information I just gave to you, so let's move on. Slope-intercept form. The way it looks is y equals mx plus b. If I go back for a moment, y equals mx plus b. I had 2x plus 4. All right? So if I use that one, here it is, 2x plus 4. Remember how this was my slope, this was my intercept. This is my slope, this is my intercept. I always have in my equations, I always have an x and a y, right? Always an x, always a y, because these all are linear equations that have two variables. So, slope-intercept form, this will represent my slope, and they always use the letter m. Don't ask why, I don't know, but they always use the letter m. And this is b for my intercept. So on each of these, I'm going to ask you, what is the slope and what is the intercept? Slope is 2, intercept is 4. How about here? What is the slope? M is 2/3. What is the y-intercept? Well, -6. Okay, next one. Well, if I look at the next one, it is not in slope-intercept form. It does not look like y equals some number x plus some number. It's in a different form. So I need to force it to be in slope-intercept form. So I'm going to come back to that one. This one here, is this one in slope-intercept form? Y equals some number x plus b. Yes. So what is my slope here? 5. What is my y-intercept here? -7. Okay, not a coincidence. All right, this one here, not in slope-intercept form. I need to force it to be. So let's force. Let's do some forcing. I want to solve for y. I want y to be by itself. So I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides, and I'm going to get 3y equals -2x plus 12. I just rewrote it because I couldn't do anything with it. Now I have to divide by 3, divide by 3, divide by 3, and I get y equals -2/3 x plus 4. Excuse me. What is, now I'm in y equals mx plus b. What's slope? M is -2/3. What is y-intercept? Y-intercept, 4. Okay? I forced it. Now I'm going to force this one. I need it to be in y equals form. Well, this one I have a couple of choices. I actually could move the y over, which would make it positive. So let's do that. I'm going to move the y over, because otherwise y is negative. So that leaves me with x is still there, y went away, 15 is still there, and on this side I have y. So now I almost have slope-intercept form, except for the y's on the right, but that actually doesn't matter because it's equal. Y equals x plus 15. Okay, so what's my slope? 1, because remember that coefficient is a 1. What is my b or my y-intercept? I haven't been using b. I could use b or I could say y-intercept, either one, is 15. Okay, now that is tricky, and I went through that really fast. So you're going to practice that in this lesson, but let's keep going. All right, now I'm giving you an equation, and I'm giving you, excuse me, a graph, and I want you to come up with the equation in the table. Well, we practiced that a little bit in the last two videos, but now we're going to do it again. So I want to know, remember here, slope-intercept form. Y equals mx plus b. Well, I know my equation has to have a y, it has to have an equals, and it has to have an x. But I can figure out the m, and I can figure out the b just by looking at my graph. Remember, m is slope, so what's the slope of this line? Well, let's figure that out. Here are some points on my line. If I figure out my rise and my run, I'll know my slope. Rise is 1, run is 3. Rise is 1, run is 3. Rise is 1, run is 3. So my rise was 1, my run was 3, so my slope is 1/3. Great. Now, what's B? Remember, B is your y-intercept. Okay, B and yi are the same thing. Okay, here's my y-axis. Let's do this one in black. Here's my y-axis. This is the y line. If I come down here, this point right here is where it intersects the y-axis. Well, where is that? -1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's at 0, -6. So what is B? -6. So I've got my equation. Y equals 1/3 x plus -6 or -6. Now can I come up with a table? Sure. I could use the points. I already came up with 1 point. I could use this point here. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's 3, -5. Or I could use my equation to figure them out. And this video is going really long, so I'm going to kind of speed up the process here. This is going to be 6, -4. This is going to be 9, -5. And I could go the other way as well. Okay, so let's keep going because, like I said, it's getting kind of long. Now I'm giving you the equation, and I want to come up with a table and a graph. Well, I could do what I did in the last chapter, or I could use my slope-intercept. This is my m. Y equals, remember, y equals mx plus b. M is -2/3. B is 6. So what I do is I go to my y-intercept. It's 6. Where's my y-axis? Where's 6? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I know it's got to cross through that point. Now I know my slope is -2/3. Well, that means you rise -2 and you run 3. So I start here. Rise -2. Run 3. Put a point. Rise -2. Run 3. Put a point. Rise -2. Run 3. Put a point. Did I make a straight line? I did. Really fast, too. I hardly did any math. That's the equation. That's the graph. That's the equation. How do you do the table? Well, you can plug in values, or you could use the points you just got. 0, 6. 1, 4. No, that's wrong. 3, 4. Sorry about that. 3, 4. 6, 2. Notice the pattern. 9, 0, etc. Okay, one more, because I got to get this under 20 minutes. Now I'm giving you the table, and I want to come up with the equation and the graph. So what's the most natural thing to do first? Well, plot the points, right? You could also calculate slope using what you did in the last unit. Y minus y1 over x minus x1, right? You have points here you could do that with. But it's going to be a little bit easier to just plot the points. So 0, 0, that's the easiest one. 1, 3, 2, 6. -1, -3, -2, -6. Straight line. I got it. Got my thing. Great. Not very well drawn. Sorry about that. What's my y-intercept? That right there. 0, comma 0. Here it is, right here, yi. And what's my slope? Well, if I do my rise over run, I rise 3, run 1. Rise 3, run 1. My slope is 3. What's my equation? Well, remember, it's y equals mx plus b. I figured my slope was 3. I figured my b was 0. I know I have to have an x and a y, so I get y equals 3x plus 0, best written as y equals 3x. That was a long video, very important, but long. Thank you.